The red lines of code bled across my monitors, a cascade of system alerts screaming a digital death knell. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a desperate dance against an unseen enemy, but I was already too late. The progress bar for the main data transfer protocol, my data, my life's work, Synapse, inched towards its horrifying completion. Each green segment that filled was another nail in the coffin of Novatech, the company I'd poured my soul into. Sweat slicked my palms, not from the heat of the server room, but from the cold dread coiling in my gut. This wasn't a random hack, this was surgical, intimate. Someone knew the architecture, every back door I'd naively left open in the name of shared access, shared dreams. The final packet transmitted with a sickening, silent finality on the admin console. Done. Years of innovation, countless sleepless nights, the revolutionary AI we were days from unveiling to the world, siphoned away into the digital ether. My breath hitched, a ragged sound in the sudden, oppressive silence of my San Francisco apartment, the city's indifferent hum a distant mockery. Then my phone buzzed on the cluttered desk, a single, stark notification cutting through the ringing in my ears. A message from Sarah, my Sarah, or the woman I had thought was mine. My heart, already a leaden weight, somehow sank further. I fumbled for the device. The screen illuminating her smiling avatar, a picture taken on our last trip to Big Sur. The Pacific, a brilliant blue behind her eyes full of a light I now realize was a masterfully crafted lie. The message itself was brief, almost an afterthought, a casual flick of a knife already buried to the hilt. Sorry, Ethan, but this is my chance. Don't try to find me. Below it, an image loaded. Sarah, radiant in a designer dress I'd never seen, clinking champagne flutes with Marcus Thorne. Thorne, the titan of tech, the investor we'd courted, the man I'd respected, his arm possessively around her waist, his reptilian smile aimed at the camera, or perhaps directly at me. They were in a private jet, the city lights sprawling beneath them like a conquered kingdom. Her chance, our dream, twisted into her solitary stepping stone. The air punched out of my lungs. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was a visceral, personal evisceration. The love I'd felt, the trust I'd so blindly given, didn't just die. It curdled, festered, and in its place, something cold and diamond, hard, began to form. There was no room for grief, not yet. Grief was a luxury for a future I no longer recognized. Right now, there was only the ice, spreading through my veins, sharpening my focus to a single, burning point. I didn't smash the monitor, I didn't scream. The cataclysm in my chest was too profound for such a mundane release. Instead, a preternatural calm settled over me. My mind, usually a whirlwind of algorithms and future possibilities, narrowed, focusing with chilling clarity. They thought they'd won, they thought I was broken, they were wrong. This wasn't an ending. This was a declaration of war. And I, Ethan, the ghost in the machine they just tried to exorcise, would be the one to burn their new empire to the ground. My fingers, steady now, moved back to the keyboard. Not in desperation, but with cold, calculated purpose. The first step was to understand the full extent of their treachery, to map the contours of their betrayal. I pulled up the server logs, the access histories, every digital footprint they might have left in their arrogant haste. The system architecture of Novatech, of Synapse, was an extension of my own mind. If there were clues, I would find them. Hours bled into one another. The city outside woke, an oblivious beast, while I delved deeper into the digital wreckage. The sophistication of the attack was Thorne's signature, brutal, efficient, leaving minimal direct trace back to him. But Sarah had been inside. She knew the shortcuts, the vulnerabilities I'd patched in later iterations, but hadn't yet fully hardened in our development environment. Her digital fingerprints were fainter, more cleverly concealed, but they were there, like a faint, mocking perfume. Then I saw it. Buried deep within a system diagnostic log I'd almost overlooked. An anomaly from 3 weeks prior. An unauthorized remote access protocol initiated from an IP address masked through a series of proxies, but the originating hardware ID, I ran a cross-check against Novatech's asset register. My blood ran cold. It was a burner laptop, one I'd vaguely remembered Sarah requesting for freelance design work, a cover story so innocuous I hadn't given it a second thought. She'd been in our system, siphoning, scouting, preparing for this coup, for weeks, maybe months, all while looking me in the eyes, sharing my bed, planning our future. The depth of the deception was staggering. But the real shock came when I traced the final hop of that burner laptop's connection before it hit the proxy chain. It wasn't from our office, nor from our apartment. It was from a secure private network, one whose digital signature I recognized with a jolt. It belonged to a small, unassuming tech consultancy firm downtown, a firm I knew for a fact had Marcus Thorne on its secret client list. This wasn't just Sarah taking an opportunity Thorne presented. This was a coordinated, long con operation. They hadn't just stolen my work, they'd played me every step of the way. And as I dug further into the encrypted communication logs, I managed to partially recover from that burner's trace. A new, chilling possibility emerged. There were fragmented messages, coded references to a Phase 2 and a failsafe that didn't make immediate sense, but they hinted at something beyond just launching Synapse under their new banner, Apex Innovations. They were planning something bigger, And Synapse, my Synapse, was merely the key. The first physical act of my new existence was to visit the now defunct Novatech office. It felt like walking into a mausoleum. The vibrant energy, the collaborative chaos that had once filled these rooms, was gone, replaced by an echoing emptiness. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, a few personal effects left behind by a team scattered to the winds, collateral damage in Sarah and Thorne's blitzkrieg. My old workstation was a grim reminder. Wiped clean, but I wasn't here for digital ghosts. I was looking for something tangible. My gut, now a reliable compass pointing towards malice, led me to a power outlet near my old desk, one I rarely used. Tucked behind the surge protector, almost invisible unless you were specifically looking, was a small, black device, no bigger than a thumb drive. A sophisticated audio bug powered directly from the mains. My blood turned to ice. They hadn't just relied on Sarah's internal access, they'd been listening possibly for months. Every strategy session, every late-night coding breakthrough, every whispered doubt or burst of inspiration, potentially all fed directly to Thorne. The audacity of it, the sheer, calculated violation, fanned the flames of my rage higher. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a deeply personal defilement. I pocketed the bug, a cold piece of evidence, another entry in the ledger I was mentally compiling. The fragmented logs I'd found mentioning Phase 2 now took on a more sinister hue. If they were willing to go to these lengths for Synapse, what else were they capable of? What was this fail-safe they alluded to? It couldn't just be a backup plan for the Synapse launch. The term felt more preemptive, like a contingency against me. My next step was reconnaissance on Apex Innovations, the phoenix risen from Novatech's ashes. Their new headquarters, a gleaming tower in the financial district, was a monument to stolen success. Security was, predictably, state-of-the-art. Physical penetration was out of the question, for now, but their digital footprint was another matter. Thorne was a master of the overt display of power, but even he couldn't control every byte of data flowing in and out of his new empire. I retreated to my Spartan apartment, now more a war room than a home. Days blurred into a caffeine-fueled haze of code and proxies. I started mapping Apex's network, identifying their key personnel, their digital routines. Sarah was listed as Chief Innovation Officer, a title that dripped with irony. Thorne, of course, was CEO. The board was a collection of his usual cronies, names I recognized from industry papers, all known for their ruthless efficiency and questionable ethics. The PR machine was already in full swing, painting Sarah as a visionary, Thorne as the benevolent enabler. It was sickeningly effective. Public opinion was lapping it up. The tech blogs lauded their Synapse, as revolutionary, a game changer. Each glowing review was another twist of the knife, but with each twist, my resolve hardened. They were building their castle on foundations of my sweat and blood, and I would be the earthquake that brought it all crashing down. During this deep dive, I stumbled upon Alex's digital trail. Alex, my former lead engineer at Novatech, my friend. Or so I'd thought. He'd been quiet since the event. Too quiet. I'd initially attributed it to shock, to the same disorientation the rest of the team felt. But the bug I'd found, the sheer premeditation of it all, sowed a new seed of distrust. I probed his online presence, his social media, his professional networks, nothing overtly suspicious, but there was a new, subtle opulence. A recent vacation to a place he couldn't have afforded on his Novatech salary, a few too many expensive dinners flagged on his public feeds, then a careless post quickly deleted but caught by one of my data scrapers, Alex, at a private party with a few low-level Apex employees in the background. The pieces clicked into place with a cold, sickening thud. The fragmented message I'd seen, the one hinting at an insider beyond Sarah, could it be Alex? The thought was a fresh betrayal, a layer of an already festering wound. If Alex had turned, he wouldn't just have known about the plan. He might have actively helped facilitate it, perhaps neutralizing internal security protocols he himself had helped design. The idea that someone I'd trusted implicitly, someone who'd shared the trenches with me, could be complicit, it made the isolation even more profound. My circle of trust had shrunk to one, myself. And my mission objectives became even clearer. It wasn't just Sarah and Thorne anymore. It was anyone who had a hand in this. The Phase 2 references in the logs continued to gnaw at me. They were too vague, too heavily encrypted in the fragments I possessed. But the term failsafe was more direct. It implied a contingency against a specific threat. And the only threat to their stolen empire, the only loose end, was me. What kind of failsafe would they implement against a single disgraced programmer? A legal gag order, financial ruin, or something more permanent? The bug in my office suggested they weren't above extreme measures. A shiver traced its way down my spine, not of fear, but of a grim understanding of the stakes. This wasn't just a fight for justice or for my creation, it was becoming a fight for my own survival. The game had changed. They weren't just thieves, they were potentially much more dangerous. And if they were anticipating my retaliation, I had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than they could ever imagine. My initial plans for a swift public takedown had to be re-evaluated. This required a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. At least, not yet. I needed more information, more leverage. I needed to understand what Phase 2 truly entailed and what their failsafe looked like before I made my move. The clock was ticking. Apex Innovations was consolidating its power, Synapse was gaining traction, and every day that passed, my chances of reclaiming anything, or even just surviving, dwindled. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had underestimated the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The hunt was no longer just about them. It was about exposing them and ensuring that whatever Phase 2 was, it would never see the light of day. My path was set, a dark, solitary road paved with algorithms and a burning, unyielding resolve. The first tendrils of my counteroffensive reached into the murky depths of the dark web. If Thorn and Sarah were operating with a Phase 2 and a failsafe, they'd need specialized resources, a cut above the usual corporate espionage. I began cultivating contacts, ghosts in the machine like myself, individuals who thrived in the digital shadows, their loyalties bought, their skills unparalleled. It was a dangerous game. Trust was a non-existent currency here. I operated under a new alias, Nemesis, a name that resonated with the cold fire in my core. My initial inquiries were cautious, probing for information brokers, data miners, anyone who might have had dealings with Thorn or his known associates, particularly those involved in high-stakes corporate acquisitions or problem-solving. The information trickled in slowly, expensive, and often unreliable. But I was patient. I cross-referenced every snippet, every rumor, building a complex web of connections. It was during this period that I first heard whispers of The Cleaner, a shadowy organization known for its ability to make digital and sometimes physical problems disappear. Thorn's name was mentioned in connection with them, not directly, but through a series of shell corporations I was slowly unraveling. This was a significant escalation. If Thorn had the Cleaner on retainer, my failsafe theory was likely an understatement. My investigation into Alex intensified. I couldn't shake the betrayal. Using a zero-day exploit I'd been saving for a rainy day, I gained access to his encrypted communications. It was a sickening tableau. The evidence was damning. Alex hadn't just known, he'd been instrumental. He'd disabled key security alerts in Novatech's system in the weeks leading up to the theft, provided Sarah with admin-level backdoors, and even helped her scrub her tracks. His payment? A hefty sum wired through an offshore account and the promise of a senior position at Apex. A promise that, I noted with grim satisfaction, seemed to be conveniently delayed in his more recent, frustrated messages to a contact I suspected was one of Thorn's underlings. Alex was a pawn, a greedy, short-sighted fool, and now he was a liability to them, and a potential asset to me. I didn't confront him directly, not yet. His fear and paranoia would be more useful if allowed to simmer. Instead, I anonymously leaked a carefully curated piece of information to one of Thorn's internal security teams, something that would subtly implicate Alex in a minor, unrelated data breach, enough to put him under scrutiny, to make him sweat, to make him a more pliable instrument when the time came. The first crack in their armor. It was through my dark web contacts that I got my first real break on Phase 2. A disgruntled ex-employee of one of Thorn's shell companies, now a data broker calling himself Oracle, reached out. He claimed to have fragments of a project proposal, heavily redacted, but with enough keywords: Synapse, predictive behavior, mass sentiment manipulation, Project Chimera, to paint a terrifying picture. Phase 2 wasn't about a new product. It was about weaponizing Synapse. My AI, designed to learn and adapt individual users to enhance their lives, was being twisted into a tool for large-scale psychological manipulation, potentially for corporate sabotage, political influence, or worse. The failsafe against me likely wasn't just to silence a whistleblower about IP theft, it was to protect this far more nefarious operation. The weight of this discovery was crushing. My creation, my dream of a beneficial AI, was on the verge of becoming a nightmare. The need for revenge was now intertwined with a far greater, more urgent responsibility to stop Project Chimera before it was fully unleashed. This changed everything. My personal vendetta had just become a crusade. The revelation galvanized my efforts. I needed to move faster, be bolder. Sarah was my primary access point to the inner workings of Project Chimera. She was the Chief Innovation Officer. After all, she had to be involved, even if only as Thorn's architect. I began to construct a multi-layered psychological operation aimed at her. I knew her vanities, her insecurities, the ambition that had driven her to betray me. I started by subtly feeding her ego. Anonymous accolades for her vision with Synapse planted in obscure tech forums I knew she frequented. Then, the counterpoint. Equally anonymous whispers about Thorn taking all the credit, about her being seen as just his pretty face, his puppet. I knew Sarah. The idea of being overshadowed, of not being recognized as the mastermind, would gnaw at her. Simultaneously, I used my access via Alex's compromised accounts, which he was now too scared to report, to plant a few carefully crafted miscalculations in Apex's internal performance reports for Synapse. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make it seem like the AI wasn't performing quite as brilliantly as Thorn expected, perhaps hinting at a flaw only its original creator could fix. I was laying a trail of breadcrumbs designed to lead her to a single, desperate conclusion. She needed me, or at least my expertise, to secure her position and the future of Project Chimera, especially if Thorn was indeed planning to sideline her. The first sign my gambit was working came in an unexpected form. Alex, now thoroughly rattled by the internal investigation I'd instigated, reached out to me. Not directly, but through a mutual acquaintance, a desperate coded plea for a meeting. He was terrified. He probably thought I was behind the investigation, which, in a way, I was, and wanted to cut a deal. This was perfect. He was my Trojan horse. I agreed to meet, choosing a public, noisy location, a crowded ferry terminal where surveillance would be difficult for Thorn's people. Alex was a wreck, a shadow of his former confident self. He confessed everything. The pressure from Thorn, the money, Sarah's manipulative charm. He confirmed Project Chimera was real, far more advanced than I'd feared, and that Thorn was becoming increasingly paranoid, trusting no one, not even Sarah, completely. He also revealed something crucial. Thorn had a private, off-grid server farm, heavily guarded, where the core of Chimera was being developed, a place known only as the Vault. Alex didn't know its exact location, but he had overheard enough to give me a general geographical area, a remote stretch of desert in Nevada. And then came his bombshell, the reason for his desperation. He discovered that the failsafe against me wasn't just digital. Thorn had put a contract out on me through the cleaner. It wasn't active yet. It was a contingency, to be triggered if I became too much of a threat. My life was literally on the line. The game had just become lethal. This new information, the contract, the Vault's general location, solidified my next moves. Alex, despite his treachery, was now more valuable, alive, and scared than exposed. I needed him to feed me any further whispers from inside Apex. His fear would be my leash. My focus shifted to Nevada, to finding this vault. It was one thing to fight a digital war, it was another entirely to contemplate a physical infiltration of a black site, likely guarded by more than just firewalls. But Project Chimera had to be stopped, and the thought of Thorn and Sarah believing they could simply erase me, then eliminate me if I became inconvenient, only fueled the icy resolve that had become my constant companion. The dark web, Oracle, Alex, they were all pieces in a much larger, more dangerous puzzle, and I was beginning to see how they might fit together. The stakes were no longer just about stolen code and a broken heart. They were about a potentially catastrophic misuse of technology and my own survival. Alex's revelation about the contract was a splash of ice water, snapping me out of any lingering vestiges of a purely digital war. This was real, tangible danger. The Cleaner. The name echoed Oracle's earlier warnings. My anonymity was my shield, but if Thorn was paranoid enough to have a contingency like that, my time was running out. Alex, predictably, offered to help me in exchange for protection, for a way out. He was a desperate man, and desperate men are both useful and dangerous. I didn't trust him, not an inch, but his information about the vault in Nevada was priceless. I gave him a secure communication channel and a specific, limited task: to plant a tracker on any hardware shipments heading towards the suspected geographical area of the vault. It was a risk, using him, but a calculated one. If he succeeded, I'd have a vector. If he betrayed me again, well, I had my own contingencies now. My psychological gambit with Sarah was also beginning to bear fruit. Through back channels, I received a cryptic message, routed through several layers of anonymity, clearly from her: Synapse is unstable. Thorn blames me. Need original architect's insight. Secure meet. High stakes. The breadcrumbs had worked. Her ambition and fear were overriding her caution. This was my opening, not just to get closer to Project Chimera, but potentially to turn Sarah, or at least use her desperation to my advantage. The meeting with Sarah was arranged with extreme paranoia on both sides. A neutral, public space, a sprawling, anonymous art gallery during a busy weekend. I arrived disguised, a baseball cap pulled low, glasses, a different gait. She was already there, pacing nervously, a stark contrast to the confident woman who'd clinked champagne flutes with Thorn. The strain was evident, dark circles under her eyes, a fidgety energy. Ethan, she breathed, her voice a mixture of relief and trepidation. I knew you wouldn't just disappear. I kept my voice cold, devoid of emotion. You made sure of that. What do you want, Sarah? She launched into a rambling explanation, painting herself as a victim of Thorn's manipulation, a pawn in his grand scheme. She claimed he'd threatened her, forced her hand. I listened, my face impassive, though every word was a fresh insult to the intelligence she clearly thought I lacked. She spoke of Project Chimera, confirming its purpose: mass sentiment manipulation, a tool to control markets, elections, public opinion. She claimed she wanted to stop it, that it had gone too far, but she needed my help to expose Thorn without implicating herself too deeply. It was a masterful performance of feigned remorse and self-preservation. I didn't buy a word of her supposed change of heart, but her fear of Thorn and her desire to save her own skin were genuine and exploitable. I can't fix Synapse for you, Sarah, I said, my voice flat. Not the version Thorn is using for Chimera, but I know its core, and I know Thorn. I proposed a counteroffer. I would help her create a kill switch for Project Chimera, a way to neutralize it remotely, but only if she provided me with irrefutable proof of Thorn's direct involvement and the exact location and schematics of the vault. She hesitated. This was more than she'd bargained for. Exposing Thorn directly put her in immense danger. He'll destroy me, Ethan. He's already destroying you, Sarah, I replied, my gaze unwavering. And if Chimera launches, he'll destroy a lot more. This is your only way out that doesn't end with you as his scapegoat or worse. I saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. The kill switch offered her a unique leverage, a way to potentially control the narrative, perhaps even to bargain with authorities later. She finally, reluctantly, agreed. The information started to flow. Encrypted files, blueprints, access codes to a lower security network layer of the vault. She didn't have everything. Thorn kept her on a need-to-know basis, but it was enough. Enough to get me inside. As she was about to leave, she paused. Ethan, about us, I cut her off. There is no us, Sarah. There's only this. Get me what I need, and maybe you'll walk away from this with more than Thorn intends to leave you with. The coldness in my voice seemed to finally break through her facade. She nodded, a flicker of something unreadable, fear, regret, in her eyes, and then she was gone, swallowed by the gallery crowd. Meanwhile, Alex came through. The tracker he'd planted on a server shipment pinged its location, a desolate, heavily fenced compound in the Nevada desert, matching the geographical markers he'd given me. The vault. Sarah's intel, combined with Alex's confirmation, gave me a clear target. The blueprints she provided were incomplete, focusing mainly on the network infrastructure and the cooling systems for the server farm. But they revealed a critical vulnerability, a maintenance access tunnel for the geothermal cooling pipes, less heavily monitored than the main entrances. It was risky, a long shot, but it was my only shot. The kill switch I was ostensibly building for Sarah was a decoy. The real payload I was designing was far more destructive. A logic bomb that would not just neutralize Chimera, but corrupt its core data, erase its learning algorithms, and simultaneously trigger a massive data dump of all of Thorn's illegal activities, including the contract on me and his dealings with the cleaner, to every major news outlet and federal agency I could find. It was a suicide mission, digitally speaking. Once triggered, my own involvement would be undeniable. But the alternative, letting Chimera launch or waiting for the cleaner's assassins, was unthinkable. The night of the infiltration was a maelstrom of adrenaline and icy calm. The Nevada desert was a vast, silent expanse under a moonless sky. I bypassed the outer perimeter security using a combination of Sarah's outdated codes and some of my own more persuasive digital tools. The maintenance tunnel was as described, dark, damp, and smelling of ozone and sulfur from the geothermal activity. The blueprints were mostly accurate, but Thorn had added new layers of internal security, laser grids, pressure plates, biometric scanners Sarah hadn't known about. Each obstacle was a puzzle, solved with a combination of technical skill, luck, and a growing sense of fatalism. I was a ghost in Thorn's machine, moving silently through its metallic veins. Finally, I reached the server core, the heart of the vault, where rows upon rows of humming servers housed the monstrous intelligence of Project Chimera. The air crackled with power. I could feel synapse, my synapse, twisted and corrupted, pulsing within these machines. There was a moment, a sliver of time, where the creator in me mourned its defilement. But Nemesis quickly reasserted control. I connected my device, began the upload of my logic bomb. The progress bar was agonizingly slow. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, the inevitable. An alarm blared. A silent tripwire I'd missed, or perhaps Sarah's intel wasn't as complete as she'd let on. Or maybe she betrayed me again. It didn't matter. Doors slammed shut, red lights pulsed, armed guards were converging. I had minutes, maybe seconds. My fingers flew, overriding security protocols, forcing the upload. 70%, 80%. A firefight erupted outside the server room. The guards were met with unexpected resistance. Alex? Unlikely. Then I saw it on a security feed I tapped into. Evelyn, Thorn's ex, leading a small, well-armed team. She'd had her own plans, her own timeline. Our paths had converged in the most violent way possible. 90%. The door to the server room buckled under heavy fire. 99%. The upload completed. I hit execute. A cascade of system failures rippled across the monitors. Chimera was dying, the data dump was initiated, I had done it, but I was trapped. Guards stormed in, weapons leveled. Thorn's voice, amplified, echoed through the facility. Ethan, you just signed your own death warrant, and hers. He meant Sarah. Had she been captured? Or was this another of his manipulations? Then, chaos. Evelyn's team breached the server room from another entrance, a full-scale battle erupting around me. It was my chance. In the smoke and confusion, I slipped away, not towards an exit, but deeper into the vault, towards Thorn's private command center, a place Sarah's blueprints had only hinted at. If I was going down, I was taking him with me. I found him there, alone, frantically trying to salvage something from the digital wreckage, his face a mask of fury. Sarah was cowering in a corner, guarded by two of Thorn's personal security. You! Thorn roared, spotting me. He lunged, not with a weapon, but with the desperate rage of a king whose empire was crumbling. Our fight was brutal, primal, amidst the dying glow of his monitors. He was stronger, but I was fueled by years of pent-up fury. Evelyn's team secured Sarah, who looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Just as Thorn was about to overpower me, a single shot rang out. Thorn crumpled. Evelyn stood in the doorway, a smoking gun in her hand. "He owed me more than just money," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The aftermath was a blur. Federal agents swarmed the vault, alerted by my data dump. Sarah was taken into custody, her fate uncertain, though her cooperation in providing the initial intel might grant her some leniency. Evelyn and her team vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, content with their own form of justice. Alex, I later learned, had been picked up by the feds, his testimony corroborating much of my data. As for me, I slipped away in the chaos, a ghost once more. The world hailed the downfall of Thorn and the prevention of Project Chimera. No one knew the full story of Nemesis. The contract from the cleaner was likely nullified with Thorn's demise, but I couldn't be sure. I was free, in a way. Synapse, my original dream, was gone, corrupted, then destroyed. But Chimera was dead. I had won. The revenge was complete. But as I looked out at the sunrise over the Nevada desert, a lone figure on an empty highway, the satisfaction was hollow. There was a vast, echoing silence where the fury had been. I had saved the world from my creation, perhaps. But in doing so, what had I become? The road ahead was uncertain, my future unwritten, the ghosts of my past, my only companions. The price of vengeance was steep, and I was only just beginning to count the cost.